This is episode 2, A Labor of Love. And today we're going to talk about preparing for the Special Forces Assessment and Selection. And just keep in mind, from here on out, I'll either refer to it as SFAS or just plain on selection. Hopefully, I'll just stick with selection. And then we'll go from there with that. So at this point, if you decide you're going to go to Special Forces Selection and Selection, you've already made a huge decision in your life. But there's some things that you need to bring to the table that's a value added to the potential regiment you're about to join. So I went back in 2001, right after 9/11, November, December 2001. And it was everybody who was going through at that time was treading into uncharted waters. The SF community was revving up for the ultimate, what would you call it, a UW mission. And teams were, you had that first group of guys heading into Afghanistan to go after the bad guys, looking for bin Laden and his stronghold. So the rest of us in the regular army was just sitting back, figuring out who's going to do what. A couple of units got deployed. The Rangers left. The task force guys left. And then you had, a few, I believe it was 5th group that was one of the first groups to enter into the landscape there in Central Asia. So in the meantime, the rest of us were like, all right, what are we going to do? So I told you my story in the last episode, how I turned to my platoon sergeant after seeing the C-130s leave Fort Bragg at the time. And I said to him, hey, I'm going to go to selection. So this is what the process was like for me back in 2001 during that time frame. And I'm going to just kind of walk you through what I went through and the mindset I had to bring to the table for my eventual donning of the Green Beret. So in November 2022, I head out to Camp McCall for selection. And one of the things that I realized that I had to bring to the table was a good attitude, and everything that entails. I couldn't, at the time, we didn't have the things that we were kind of plagued with today. Social media, I believe YouTube was very, very young at that time period. Very few videos were circulating on that. And if people were actually on the social media networks, it wasn't that big of a deal, and we weren't inundated with the amount of media that we have today. So we were basing everything that we learned about the time period, for that time period, based off of mainstream media, CNN, Fox News, your other major networks, ABC, NBC. And so going into these uncharted territories, I had to bring everything I have to selection, because this is something that I wanted so bad. And I think at the time, what gave me the balls to stand up and go ahead and push forward with that decision was essentially that our nation was just attacked. And then I had to think about my daughter, who was born she should have been a year old at this time period, closing in on 1 year old. And then I was closing in on my 2nd year of marriage. And I had to take everything, all the bad attitudes that I had prior and leading up to it, to making that decision. I had to leave them behind. So my platoon sergeant, when I approached him about going to SFAS, he goes, look, man, at the end of the day, it's all on you. It's the big boy rules. He, having been selected and started the Q course and had to get out because of his marriage. And that's going to be the second point I make outside of making, um, having a good attitude about going into selection. But anyway, he was 18. He had gotten selected and was now, going through the 18 Delta pipeline, and he got a good, a good ways through through the Delta program when it started interfering with his marriage, and so he had to drop. So that's what he tells me, and I believe him to this day. But anyway, so with that good attitude comes being prepared. You got to be prepared for the decision that you just made. That meant that once I had gone to the recruiter and they gave me the packet on, how to train up for it, because this is September. I went to selection in November, so that left me all the month of October to get ready for selection. So, short period of time, I wasn't that great at PT. Meaning I was scoring about, on average, about a 270 on my PT test. I was a strong rucker. I was a mediocre runner, but the push-ups and sit-ups, that part, and obstacle courses that we did, it really, I was, I was, I was, I was right in the middle of the pack of my platoon. Now, mind you, I come from a support MOS, so a lot of these functions that we did as support guys didn't really pertain to going out on the battlefield, and we didn't have to be conditioned for that. So he says to me, he's like, "Hey, man, PT is still at 6:30. You still have your duties and responsibilities that you have to the platoon and to the company. You still have jumps you have to maintain, and you still have all your leadership duties um, that's been bestowed upon you. So I'm all for you going to selection, but if you go, don't come back." And he said that with all the love that a sergeant first class can have and say to his troops. Now, at the time, I took it as a kick in the nuts, to be honest with you. He told me not to come back, that there wasn't a spot here for me, that when the leadership position, because I was a specialist at the time, the leadership position will go to somebody else. And quite frankly, I don't want you back. So be gone. All right. So during that next 4 weeks, my unit was right down the street from the gym. So the gym opened up at 5 o'clock. So I would wake up at 3:30, get ready for the day, make sure my boots were shined, my uniform was pressed, drive to the gym, work out, I would park my car at the unit and then walk down to the gym, work out, run my butt back for formation, check in on my troops, make sure they're ready to go. And I, did PT, went throughout the course of my day. And at the end of the day, I was back in the gym for a swim. Then I headed home, pressed iron my uniform, shined my boots, got my gear squared away, and I did that for a month. And then in the meantime, I had to get, find time and money to get all the supplies I needed to bring with me to Special Forces Assessment and Selection. So I show up and I'm ready to go. And there was nothing going to stop me because of the very things that my platoon sergeant said to me. So, my second point, if you're going to make this decision to go to selection and try your hand at being a Green Beret, because all they're going to do at selection is assess and then determine whether or not they're going to select you or not. And if you're bringing to the table everything that they feel is the baseline for being part of the regiment. That's it. At that point, you get off that truck, there are a lot of realities that sink in. And so the second point I want to make is before you get on that truck, you make sure you talk this decision over with your spouse. Let them know what this what this what the second and third order effects of this decision is going to be on not just your career for the rest of your time you're in the military, but on the family. And from there, if she doesn't have buy-in, then I would reassess that decision, and I'm gonna go back to my platoon sergeant and as to why he decided to with voluntary withdrawal from the Q course when he did. So he was telling me that because of the class demands of studying uh, and showing up for training and his general mood, it got in the way with his family life, and his wife wasn't having it. And so she said, they had a little girl at the time, and she said to him, it was either me or your career, and he chose her. And to this day, or up until, God rest his soul, he passed away some time ago in a motorcycle accident. But one of the things I ran into him, he was working he was an E8 at the time, working at 7th Group. I think he was in the signal detachment there. I'm not really sure what his job was, but one of the things he told me that, one, he was proud of me for making that decision, and two, that he regret every minute that he regret most of his career that he pulled out when he did. But he doesn't regret the reason. And that's the point I want to make, So the point is, at the end of the day, make sure your spouse has buy-in, because this is going, she's going to wear that beret just as much as you're going to wear that beret. And it's good to acknowledge that for her, so that give her that credit, because she is going to be taking care of your household. She's going to be taking care of your finances, paying the bills, hopefully, and keeping everything in order so that you can do your job. So we got attitude, marriage, and I touched on physical fitness. So you got to toughen up your feet, man. You got to toughen up your back. You got to get in the gym. If you know that within the next 6 months you're going to be going to selection, go to your local recruiter on post, and most major posts will have a special forces recruiter. Go there, schedule a time to sit down with the recruiters, find out what the data, find out everything you can about being a Green Beret. Take that information and share it with the other guys in your unit if those guys are interested. And also make sure that your wife knows. Ask a lot of questions about family life. Ask a lot of questions about team life and expectations. Ask questions about what the Q course life is like. These are all things I didn't really talk about. I had a pretty strong relationship with my wife. I still do. We've been married for 25 years. But as much information she knows about, oh man, I'm out of focus. Focus it up. As much information she knows about what you're going to be doing for your career, the more comfortable she's going to feel in preparing herself for the decision that you're making. And so that's what's key at the end of the day. So, but physical fitness is really important. Getting in the rucks, working on your diet. Yeah, you're going to lose some weight in selection, but at the same time, you got to learn how to fuel yourself. You also have to learn how to rest your body and rest and recover your body. And there's a pretty good, I haven't looked at the website in a while, but there is a website there's a web, I'll put it in the description if I can find it, that gives you um, a meal plan, as a nutritional plan, as well as a workout plan for preparing for selection. There are some publications I would offer you to read the land navigation manual. A lot of good information in that manual on land navigation, and the Ranger Handbook. Those for selection, those two things will take you a long ways. The Fieldcraft and the Ranger Handbook is great, and the land navigation manual is going to give you a lot of information regarding your compass, your lensatic compass, and the map data. And those two things are going to get you through the land nav portion. The rest of the rest of selection is going to be primarily physical fitness and a little bit of sleep deprivation. So I arrived there in November. We get off the bus, and immediately you go into classes. You bunk down. They assign you your bunks. They give you your roster number. You're going to sew that bad boy on your uniform, on both legs above the cargo pocket. And I believe there's going to be one. You're going to sew your other roster number above your U.S. Army name tape, and that's your number for the remainder of the time. At least when I went through, when we bunked down for the night, we did 15-minute fire guard shifts. Mainly, those shifts were for the sole purpose of checking a whiteboard that every 15 minutes, there at any given time, the instructors can put some information up on the whiteboard, and that determined whether or not you're going to show up for a formation in the next 30 minutes, or you're going to bed down and get some sleep for the next 45 minutes. You never know what's going to happen. And nor am I going to ruin the movie for you, because selection is a lot different now than it was when I went through. In fact, while I was going through the Q course, towards the end, they went to a 2-week selection. They went from a 3-week or 28-day selection, or 21-day with some admin days on the front end and back end, which made it about 28, to a 2-week selection where they just gave you the meat and potatoes right up front, and then hammered you for those 2 weeks, and then you were either selected or not. A little cool story about when I went through selection. So back in 2000, there was a recruiting campaign when the Army went from be all you can be to the Army of One. And they had these commercials that were spotlighted on early morning TV. So when I would wake up early in the morning, you would see, getting ready for work, getting my gear together. I throw on the TV on Fox News during the commercial breaks. You would see this Army commercial that popped up. And then what it was this guy. I can't remember his name. I went through selection with him, and he was a twin. He had a twin brother. I believe they were part of the engineer brigade there at Fort Bragg. Really cool guy, but he was the guy in the commercial, and the commercial was this dude running through the desert, and he's in a Army tan t-shirt and his BDU bottoms. He has a rucksack on and his Dow tags. So imagine this Hispanic dude, in good shape, running through the desert, through the sagebrush, and there's like this there's this the dark voice talking about the Army in the background, and there's all this nice Army music, accompanying it. and he's just running, and everything's in slow motion, and his dog tags are flapping in the wind, and he's just getting after it, and it's like the army of one. So anyway, he's in my class. This guy is in my class, right? And apparently, and this guy's a stud, because he went to selection twice. He didn't get selected the class before us. I believe I want to say his brother did. I could be wrong on that. They went through at the same time, or maybe his brother didn't ever go. I don't know. There were so many stories floating around by the end of my class that I didn't even know what was right and what was wrong. But anyway, he was a 21 days non-select, and he was like, you know what, I can do this. And he went through my class and he got selected. And I don't believe he continued on with the Q course. I believe he decided to stay and can finish out his career as an engineer in the conventional forces. But anyway, these are the type of people that end up trying out for special forces, and everyone has a story, right? But anyway, third thing I want to talk about is friendships and your ability to socialize amongst other people, people that you don't know. One of the things that make special forces really unique is that we can build friendships and relationships with people of all walks of life. Excuse me, I just want to make sure I give my camera there some activity. Anyway, so back at it. So you have to have the ability to build relationships with people and talk and get along. One of the things that's really key and important for selection is to build those relationships, regardless if you make it through or not. All right, because at the end of the day, if you don't make it, but you built these friendships, guess what? You got that's the brotherhood that you've built for a long time. Now, when I went through, I was a support guy, like I said before, but I was also there with, and this right here gave me a lot of confidence. I was there with a bunch of Rangers, a bunch of infantry guys, a bunch of guys that were from other various combat arms, artillerymen, but I was also there with cooks and chaplain assistants and pack clerks, mechanics, heavy wheel and light wheel mechanics, tankers, what do you call them? Cav scouts, you name it. Everybody from across the Army was doing this thing, was trying out, was at selection during this time period. And the cool thing was, I latched myself on to the guys who were from Ranger Bat or who I thought to be Ranger qualified in the infantry guys. And the reason for that is because I kind of idolized them. These guys have already walked across the coals of the hot coals, so to speak, going through Ranger school. These guys have already spent days, if not weeks and months, out in the field. They came with a wealth of field craft. They came with a wealth of knowledge, and they also were really easy to get along with. Everybody there was pretty damn well easy to get along with. But there was a reason for that, and that's because there's a peering. You rate the guy to the left and right of you, even guys you don't know, and then you give them a peer rating. And if someone pissed you off, I mean, that's the way it was, but if you got along with people, you didn't find yourself getting stuck in that cycle, that pool of negative peers. So what I'm getting at is get along, be likable, but also have a degree of competence, because likability is only going to get you so far. And I have a story for that, and I'll tell it to you now. So there was this guy I went through the Q course with when I was going through the 18 Echo course. My my class was the first class not to have Morse code. And so there was some angst, some disagreement from the cadre about the decision, but that was a decision that we as students could make. That was a command decision to get rid of Morse code. So instead, the big focus was on HF communications and SATCOM, but there were they had to have some heavy discriminators. Now, the Echo course, when it came to physical fitness, was at the time by far the most brutal PT sessions that I ever been through. I'm talking on average a 4 to 8 mile run every day at a 7.5 mile pace. Follow, before that, that's all the push-ups, sit-ups, buddy carries, you name it. It was a smoke session every day, and every day you had to bring it. The ruck days were days, no less than 60 pounds at whatever instructor who can ruck the fastest pace. And if you were a short guy, I mean, you were running the whole time. I'm a pretty tall guy, and I was a pretty strong rucker, but I wasn't a really strong runner. So I fell out of a bunch of runs in the Echo course. They didn't count it against you, given there was no ability groups. There was only one, and that was fast as hell. But when it came to rucking, I could hang with the best. But anyway, so we were on our ruck day, and this guy, likable guy, I didn't like him personally, but he got along with everybody else. I thought he was phony. I thought he used people. I felt like he was no value added. And anyway, on this particular day, we've just finished up a ruck, and the instructor, he went around, he was picking, we were doing flutter kicks and push-ups with our rucksacks in front of us, and he would walk up and pick up, because don't be light, don't be late, and don't lie. Those were the 3 L's for PT in the Echo course. And he picks up this dude's ruck, and it was obvious he had nothing but whoobies, pillows, and air in his rucksack. And I was like, holy crap, we're done. And I believe this was a Wednesday, if I remember right. Well, anyway, so he was pissed, and he continued to smoke us. And he was like, you know what? At lunch, you guys eat chow, meet us at the cadre office. We got something for you. So we show up that day, and he comes out, and he goes, be out at it was called the Matamau. I don't know what it stands for, MATA. But it was where the Echoes would launch for our runs and rucks, and did our PT in a little parking lot there. He says, be there on Saturday at 04. Well, somehow this guy weaseled himself out of it. It was like, because it was like a spur of the moment thing. It wasn't a planned PT session. The guy who had the light ruck didn't show up. While the rest of us who did showed up, guess what? We got the living crap smoked out of us. So from 04 that morning to about noon that day, the cadre came in and tag teamed us. And I tell you what, we didn't have a light ruck for the rest of the time in that classroom. But I remember that moment and held it against this dude until I got to group. And the day, so I'm going to fast forward. That's all I'm going to say about that. It really sucked. I ended up getting recycled, they made me an 18 Charlie, which was the best thing for me. I'll tell you that right now. I'm glad they made me an 18 Charlie. I love the job. I was quite frankly tired of communications, because that's the background I came from. And I just didn't want to be another black dude being an Echo. So anyway, so now I'm at third group Alpha Company. I'm on ODA 3312. And this guy, I walk in on day one and I see this dude and he's just like, "Hey, Mackie, what's up? Blah, blah." Trying to be my friend. I was like, I was with my platoon, my team sergeant at the time. I'm just going to call him Hamchuck because that's the nickname that he went by on the team. So Hamchuck was like, "Hey, because mind you, this guy got to group before me because of my recycle." And I was like, "Yeah, I know him." I was in the echo course with him, and he was like, "Oh, this guy's a dirtbag, dude. Stay away from him." I go, "No, I don't want nothing to do with that guy. I hate him, and he's part of the reason why I'm a Charlie right now." But anyway, that's besides the point. This guy had been bounced from one team to another team to another team before he committed a major violation in the school that got him kicked out and got his tab revoked. So I say all that to say this: just because you're likable doesn't make you competent, and just because you're competent, you don't have to be likable. But it goes competence and likability goes a long way, and they actually are hand in hand. I'd rather have a competent Green Beret on my team that knows his job that I barely like. And we'll just leave it at that. But I talked about being prepared, great attitude, family life, physical fitness, and all right. So towards the end, so like I said, I told you before in episode 1 that I did not go through team week. That wasn't something that we had any control over. Again, that was a command decision, and it kind of reverberated to the cadre. Because we didn't go through team week, they felt like we hadn't had that trip through the fire. So the Q course was pretty brutal, especially when you go through Robin Sage. Yeah, that's you got to be in shape for Robin Sage for that infill, because the infill is going to be brutal depending on what lane you get. But oh shit, I totally forgot what I was talking about. Okay, anyway, but team week. So I know I was talking about team week. So team week is because I never gone through it, so I actually never been to SWIC as an instructor. Instead, I did the ROTC thing. Was an ROTC instructor to get a break, and that's when I retired. So my last 3 years in the military was spent here in Orlando at the University of Central Florida as an ROTC instructor. So the only thing I can say about team week is going to break you off, because by the time you get to team week, you've already done an unknown distance ruck, a couple unknown distance runs. You walked the land nav course several times, and you've probably put on at least 50 to 60 miles on your feet during that course time period. Because I went through a time where we didn't have team week, we did have what we called a Death Star. And basically, it was 8 points in 48 hours. And it's going to be it was like everything else where you had, everything was a crawl, walk, run for the land navigation phase. You basically, you did your terrain association walk with the cadre, and then you did a couple practice land nav courses, self-correcting courses. And then after you did those self-correcting courses, you did a couple, we did 4 stars. And I think we had 4, I don't remember how many points we had, but we had a bunch of points that we had to do it. But this Death Star was 8 points over the course of 48 hours. It doesn't matter what time I came in, but I was pretty impressed with my time. It was just a little over 24 hours. And I was was pretty satisfied on the distance I covered. But that really broke me off. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. And then shortly after that, we had a big dinner, and then you can be determined to be a 21-day non-select going towards the end. So you can, so team week. So instead of that long Death Star, we had you'll have team week. And team week consists of, you can go and find YouTube channels where they talk about team week, and you can actually, I think Surviving the Cut is one of the YouTube channels, or that's the name of the video, and it covers down on team week and how brutal team week is. I'm not going to ruin the movie for you. You get to that point, it's a gut check. At the end of the day, it's a straight gut check, and it will kick you. It was a ball breaker. It can be a ball breaker. It wasn't a ball breaker for me because I didn't do it. I go out now. I do work for the Army as a defense contractor, and I do go out and support SF selection with tracking devices that monitor your guys' movements while you're out there. So that being said, one of the key things for land navigation is to not fall asleep. Like once they launch you, don't walk off 100 meters into the wood line and fall asleep in the dark. One of the big things about Army schools is it's to build confidence in the skills that you're taught, and confidence in your use of the tools that are given to you to accomplish those tasks. For instance, in selection, you'll be issued 2 lensatic compasses, a protractor, a map. You have to make a map case for yourself. Bring some really good writing utensils for that, and understand how to organize yourself to get from point A to point B. All right. But you have to have confidence in the tools that you have. So they're going to give you the best land nav class I've ever gotten was at selection. They're going to give you everything you need to know how to land nav. They're just not going to give you some points, say plot them, and then go out into the wood line and try to find these points. Pay attention to what they're saying, because these guys know what they're talking about. For example, they're gonna start off real basic. The really, really basic. They're gonna teach you how to plot a 4-digit grid, 6-digit grid, and then an 8-digit grid. And when you go out for the terrain association, they're going to walk to a terrain feature on the map. They're going to say, hey, you're standing on a hilltop. Take a look. And then they're going to describe what a hilltop is. They're going to define what that is. And then they're going to say, follow me. And the cadre, wearing a ruck, weighing about the same as you're wearing, he's going to take off, and you're going to follow him to the next point. And they're going to say, hey, this is the Ho Chi Minh Trail, or this is Baggett Lake, or this is, they're going to point out these terrain features, and hopefully take you down the Scuba Road and show you where the only crossing points are. Don't cheat. There's no point in cheating. You're not benefiting yourself by cheating on the land nav course. Don't try to go out to Hoffman and try to take these, $100 courses that are going to show you where all the points are. Dude, just go out there blind and trust your equipment. When they launch you, don't launch and walk 100 meters in the wood line. Launch and find your point. I found it to be easier to land nav at night than like in the pitch dark than to land nav in daylight. Let me tell you why. Because I had to trust my compass the whole time. And if I remember correctly, I finished up my land nav, if I remember correctly, in the early hours of the morning, like a couple hours after sunrise. heading off to my last and final point when the sun was over the horizon. I trusted my equipment, and I really wanted it. The only time that I questioned my life and my life decisions was when we were doing that 48-hour ruck, or that 48-hour Death Star. And let me tell you why. Because I got tired, I got hungry, I was sweating. I mean, my feet were aching, and I made all sorts of promises to God and country. If I made it through the Q course and I got selected, what I would do. And I still owe God a lot, but that's besides the point. At the end of the day, give it all you got. Don't cheat. Don't don't try to bring out any land navigation aids that will help you, because they will find out. You will get found out either by an instructor or another student, or you'll give yourself away. I've seen it. I've seen guys get caught with GPSs. I've seen guys get caught with having been out there before and trying to mark places to go, and it just doesn't work, man. Pay attention to the cadre. The cadre are going to give you everything you need. Take copious notes, and hopefully, one of these podcasts, I'll talk about land navigation and what I did, and what I still do when I go hiking. I can talk about it now. Anyway, all I do is I make sure I plot my point, right? I plot it. I make sure I check it twice. Plot where I'm at and plot where I want to go. I do it twice. It's that whole carpenter adage of measure twice, cut once. Then I measure up my distance. How long is it from the straight line distance? And I look at what's in between where I'm at and my endpoint. I look at my endpoint and I establish a backstop. And a backstop is it's usually like a terrain feature or something beyond the point that I can easily identify if I go too far. Then I scoot back a little bit from the point and I look at an attack point. An attack point is a known point, like an intersection or a hilltop or a ridge line or a draw, or like something that is easily identifiable. Once you get there, you know it's there, right? And I measure the distance, and usually my attack points are no more than 100 to 150 meters. I try to, if I can't find that, and maybe it's 200 meters. If I can't find that, then it's maybe 400 meters. Who knows? But at the end of the day, my attack point is something that I know is there, and my backstop I know is something there, and then my point will be anywhere in between. Now, you're allowed to what they call handrail a road. You can't be anywhere. You can't be closer than 100 meters to the road and walk in parallel to it. You can cross roads, but you cannot navigate using roads. You kind of do, but you're not. So what they want you to do is trust your equipment, and so you can handrail a road, and that's walking parallel to the road, but you have to be 100 meters from it, and you can use those to get you to your attack point. A lot of times what I would do is, depending on where I was, if there was a major road, like a 3-wire road or a 5-wire road, so to speak, I would find that road and I would parallel it until I get to my attack point. Use my attack point. It might be a 5-point intersection. I'll cross that directly and continue on to my backstop. If I hit my backstop first and I hit the point, then I know I've gone too far. Then I'll just back it up and start boxing my little corridor. And that's what I did. And I would write out each of my azimuth, my lengths. I never traveled in a direct straight line from point A to point B. A lot of times there was a dog leg. I would dog leg towards a road. I would travel towards a road, and then I would parallel the road until I crossed another road, and then I might have to take but I wrote down how far I was doing each of those legs. So I knew, all right, hey, for the next 400 meters, I'm going to walk on this azimuth parallel on this road, and I should hit 1, 2, 3 roads, and then I might hit my attack point at that point. Next thing I would do is, along with that, is I would make sure I have a good pace count. So you're going to have an opportunity where they have lanes that are measured out for 100 meters for you to figure out what your pace count is. Do it at night, do it in the daytime. Mine was the same for both. My pace count really hasn't changed much since selection. I'm around, mine is 60. I would recommend that your pace count end on a 0 every time. So, increments of 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Mine is 60. So if it's 64, I know if you move 6, so if you measure out in your, I know there's going to be at 10 kilometers, there's going to be a 100-meter discrepancy. I know that. I understand that. But I also understand that I'm not going to always be walking in a straight line. And so sometimes I might be going downhill. Sometimes I might be going uphill. So 60 was the little sweet spot for me. What you can also do is find a place that has 100 meters that's uphill and do a pace count that's uphill. I would do it both walking and running. I would also learn how to fashion a pace count beads out of 550 cord or paracord. You can buy the little plastic ones out of like Ranger Joe's or whatever, but I found those tend to break. And I think what we ended up using in the Q course is the M81, the rubber stoppers that are inside the demolitions, the initiators. You can tear those apart, and they have these little rubber grommets on the inside. And those were great for pace count beads. They lasted forever, but you can use just regular pace paracord to make the beads. And maybe I can do a YouTube video on that. I believe I might have one in my older, when I first started off. I don't remember if I have one or not. I could do a new one. Who cares? But yeah, and so at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, let's talk about. I'm gonna at least talk about how we found out if we were selected or not. So towards the end, after we had done our Death Scar, we had our big dinner. We were all kind of sitting around. There was a bunch of guys who didn't get any. And mind you, I left a lot of stuff out. I didn't talk about Nasty Nick. I didn't talk about, that's the obstacle course. I'm not going to talk about the runs or what the physical fitness requirements are because I just don't know anymore. I haven't been down. I go out to selection, but for work, but my job is not focused on that portion of the Q course. My focus is primarily on the land nav portion, and I'm not an instructor or anything like that. I just provide a tracker that you guys will be wearing so if you get hurt, the cadre can find you. But back in the day when I went through, at least when I went through, the cadre came out. We were in the auditorium there, writing some AARs and our peers when the cadre would randomly call out guys, roster numbers, and then they'll tell them to gather up all their stuff and come outside for counseling or for a board or whatever. And sometimes those guys came back and sometimes they didn't. And so I believe we started off with, I'm just going to say, the class size back then was 400. And by the time I finished, I want to say it was roughly 150 guys remaining. And I want to say between that 150, less than that was selected. And throughout the course of that one day, that 150 just got whittled down and whittled down and whittled down. And you sat there and there was some anxiety because you were just like, crap, man. I didn't do good here. I didn't do good there. You're really focused on what you didn't do good. Don't worry about it. If you feel pretty confident that you found your points, you feel pretty confident that you negotiated the obstacles, you did well in the runs, you did well in the rucks, you'll be fine. Well, and then, so at the end of that day, we ended up gathered up and placed on the rocks. At the time, it was all rocks. What Camp McCall today doesn't look like what Camp McCall looked like when I went through. So they had this huge formation on the rocks, and they did one last call of roster numbers, and you weren't really sure whether or not those guys made it through, but they came back and joined you in the formation, and then they did one last call of numbers, and they said, hey, if we call your number, move off to the left, and you guys remain standing. And so they called off, maybe like 15. And they called off a bunch of numbers. I don't know. I don't remember. And they marched those guys away. And then the NCOIC, the non-commissioned officer in charge of SFAS, once they were out of the picture, he was like, congratulations, if you're standing here, you were selected. And it was a pretty emotional event for me. I was happy. I didn't know what I just couldn't imagine what the rest of my career was going to look like at that point. But I do know that I felt like I accomplished something really big. And I hope that when, for those of you guys who went through my time period, you can relate to the joy you felt getting selected. Hopefully I've, brought back some memories on what that process was like for you. But then, the next thing was selection. And then we spent the next couple of days figuring out the Q course. And we spent the next couple of days figuring out what MOSs we wanted, what groups we hoped to be stationed with, what languages we wanted to learn. And it was a good experience. And I hope the best for you all who are looking at wanting to one day make that step. Is the best decision I ever made. To this day, I've had some crappy days in SF, and those crappy days were better than my best days in the regular Army. And if you're listening and you think that's not the route you don't want to go, man, God bless, man. Go forth in good things. The Army needs you. And if you ever find yourself supporting group, enjoy the time while you're there. And I hope it's a great stepping stone for your career. And those who do go and get selected, welcome to the first phase of joining the Special Forces Regiment. God bless, and Deo Pressa Liber. That's it. I'm out.